Good morning, people in the United States, and good afternoon and good evening to people dialing in from Europe and in Asia Pac. Welcome to today's fairly eagerly anticipated webcast. We have the wonderful title of RPA is Dead, Long Live the Integrated Automation Platform. So welcome. My name is Phil Furst. I'm the CEO Chief Analyst at HFS, and I'm being joined by some excellent individuals today. Rajan Nair, who's the Head of Financial Services at Indicom, the mortgage processing provider. Ash Mehra, who's the co-founder CEO of AntWorks, and his sidekick, Mr. Govind Sandhu, who's also a co-founder and the COO at AntWorks, and my colleague Elaine Christopher, who runs a lot of our automation services research at HFS. So welcome for today's conversation. And just before we get started, we've just released a terrific little white paper, or point of view as we like to call it, where we're getting into the nub of the conversation, what we call integrated automation, what it's all about, why it's relevant, why the industry needs to make a shift from some of the legacy thinking of recent years. So that is available. We talk a bit about the Indicom experience as well, which you'll be hearing about today. So if you go to our website or you go to the AntWorks website, we'll direct you to where you can download this. That'll be fantastic. And we'll also send a link out to everybody at the end of the webinar today. So you'll be able to share some of the slides and also download the report. Here's some housekeeping. You can see in your right-hand side of the screen a little pop-up window on the lovely Zoom icon. Apparently Zoom, by the way, is the third most attractive pre-IPO company today, so I just thought I'd plug that. But it's available where you can type in your question, and we'll try and get to as many of your questions as possible today. If not, we'll also try and respond offline to some of your needs. That's great. So look on the right-hand side for the Q&A panel. We'll talk today about the market context, why it's time to really shift from this fairly confused concept of RPA and really look at the integrated automation paradigm that's really unraveling before our eyes. We will spotlight on the experience that Rajan is having with Indicom, so we'll share some of that with you. And then we'll get into some real actionable recommendations of where this is all going and how we start to think about scaling automation programs and driving more transformative business initiatives, leveraging automation and data ingestion and curation tools. You probably all know who we are at this point, HFS. We are the lucky gold star who've changed our name from Horses for Sources to HyperConnected Future State. That's what we like HFS to stand for today, because we really look at the AAA of AI, automation, and smart analytics, and then how this really applies to operations and infrastructure and industry. So we look at global sourcing and talent. We're very focused on the exciting emergence of blockchain and its applications to business. And we really get down and dirty into digital business models and how these are evolving by industry and how we can really leverage latest tech and services and talent to get ahead of the game. And I think one phrase which is going to sum up a lot of today's conversation and where we are as an industry is that we've got to get beyond fixing legacy issues and focus much more on driving our people to rewire business operations to stay ahead of this market. We have to think about changing the way we do things, not just exacerbating the same old, running it a little bit faster, cheaper. And so that takes us to this image we have. We call this, the HyperConnected Enterprise. And, I think the biggest problem today is that, many enterprise operations operate around the fact that they still run most of their processes exactly the same way as they did decades ago, with the only innovation really being models like offshore outsourcing, shared services, cloud and digital technologies, enabling those same processes to be conducted steadily faster and cheaper. Fundamental changes haven't really been made to intrinsic business processes. Most companies are still operating with their major functions like procurement, customer service, marketing, finance, HR, supply chain, etc., operating in individual silos, with IT really operating as a non-strategic vehicle to maintain the status quo and keep the lights on. As our hyperconnected journey here illustrates, many industries have now reached a place where they've maximized all their delivery methods for getting processes executed as efficiently and cheaply as possible. You know, they've tackled the early phases of digital impact by embracing interactive technologies to help them respond to customer needs as those needs occur, whether they're electronic or in voice. So in short, most enterprises, you know, have been able to keep pace with each other without actually changing the underlying logic of processes. Just simply doing things the same old way has been enough for many until a competitor comes along with an entirely unique way of servicing your customers to shrink your market share or even take you out of the game completely. So we're already in this kind of one-office phase where wrapping the needs of our customers around our front to back office processes is critical. And you can't do that by simply adding more software and bot licenses to stitch together, you know, wonky systems and processes. You actually have to redesign how processes work so you can outthink your competitors. Simply reacting to customer demand just won't work these days. You have to be able to anticipate and think ahead, try and predict how their needs will change even before your customers do. So this means you need systems in place to mine information up and down your supply chains, your B2B networks, and really understand today's geopolitical environments. You've got to have smart people who can think creatively to really drive these systems for you. You know, and I wanted to sort of set some context around what is going on with talent, because that's going to dominate a lot of today's conversation. And, you know, I took some data from the World Economic Forum research that came out this year, where they spoke with 100 of the leading companies per industry sector to understand, you know, what were the barriers to change within organizations. And I think what is quite alarming here is that it's not just about not understanding what's disruptively coming for your business. You know, it's not just about complaining about we don't have enough money to change. 37% actually believe their workforce strategy is not aligned to their innovation strategy. This is a major problem, right? Companies have talent who might be capable, but they're not learning, they're not really figuring out what they need to be successful as things evolve in this hyper-connected economy. I mean, 4 billion devices are now connected by people globally, and we need to figure out how we look at these skills that we need to evolve. So we have to understand things like cognitive flexibility, which is about generating different sets of rules for combining or grouping things in different ways. We need to understand how to get better at that. We need to be more creative about coming up with unusual or clever ideas about a given topic or situation to develop creative ways to solve a problem. We need to think about, you know, logical reasoning, which is where we combine pieces of information together to form general rules or conclusions. That could be a relationship among seemingly unrelated events. And we have to apply these to specific problems and produce answers that make sense. In addition to that, we need to look at things like how do we monitor ourselves and others around us? How do we assess our performance of ourselves, other individuals, or other organizations to make improvements and take corrective action? So, you know, getting to the sort of realities of RPA, I'd like to sort of set this in context for today a bit, where, you know, many may remember in 2012 we came out with a fairly famous blog which was around robotic automation emerging as a threat to the traditional outsourcing models. This obviously, you know, became an industry in itself. It became hugely impactful across the media, and, you know, we're now 7 years into this journey. And recently, you know, we've worked with some great players like AntWorks, who are today on the call, for example, where we've started to look at the concept of integrated automation as a way forward, because the concepts of RPA, the way they're currently structured, just simply don't work. I mean, 85% of RPA deals are now attended automations, because the original concept was, how do we drive unattended back office automation that could help transform a business? Most of the big 3 RPA vendors today realize they couldn't sell this hard enough, so they're having to move to more attended automation to drive growth in their market, which unfortunately isn't really about you know, processes anymore. It's much more about activities and tasks and screen scrapes and things that have been around for many years. It's about maintaining legacy as opposed to thinking about how do we actually change intrinsically those business processes to move beyond those legacy phases. Another, you know, we've looked at all the RPA contracts that are out there, and only 20% of them have real process focus. they're not RPA. So even if we get into all these arguments about is the industry dead or not, it just wasn't well defined, and it wasn't thought through properly, and it isn't where the industry is shifting when we look at what's happening, as we move down the road. Because, we've taken some data here from, our global study we conducted with KPMG, which looked at, 590 of major businesses right across the globe. And we wanted to understand the key strategic goals behind intelligent automation. And revenue growth is by far and away the most strategic goal that companies are looking at. This is where, they're really looking to drive investment, for example. And when we look at their operational objectives, it's not about driving out headcount. And in fact, barely 1% of companies now are looking at automation as a way to eliminate headcount. They're looking at it as a way to improve customer service quality, streamlining customer delivery, and front office effectiveness. So I think the good news is that this old way of thinking about we're just going to drive out headcount, we're going to drive out cost, is shifting much more to how can we improve customer quality, how can we use this to drive the experience of our customers and the experience of our employees. And the biggest challenge now we're seeing is how to really leverage the freed up time within the organization. So when you spend time with maybe the companies who've industrialized automation, they talk about how many man hours they've given back to the business. So what do you do with those man hours when they've been freed up? How do you really embrace them? How do you leverage them more effectively? In terms of where the investment we're seeing, the level of automation today, it's starting to increase quite a lot more in certain areas. So you can see F&A now is, starting to become the increase. 23% of companies are now spending more than 50 million on that function. We're seeing it invested more in GBS and compliance areas as well, and then core IT and core digital. And then how do we measure these costs though? And this is the other problem we have, and we'd love to maybe get this on the docket today a bit more, is, as we look at, what are you measuring here in terms of the benefits? Too many companies are still thinking about measuring things in terms purely of cost, as opposed to productivity and actual impact on the customer. So while it's good to start to look at return of productive hours of the business, we're still looking at how we're driving out cost, and is that the right way to really think about this? And the other thing we've got to really understand here is that, and we think this is generous, but when we really looked across these 590 organizations and where they were across all these different elements of intelligent automation, you can look at computer vision, you can look at machine learning, you can look at all these different areas, and RPA, only 13% feel they've got any sort of scaled up industrialization achieved with their RPA initiatives. And this is telling you it's still 27% of these companies are moving to production, a third are just in pilot. So we're still at a very early phase in this market, and it's time to really define this in a much more intelligent way, because as an organization, it's not about managing these little technology pieces in silos. It's about integrating them together so you can start to benefit from each other. It's about how do you start to leverage your skills and your team across the technologies that you're looking at to really achieve those outcomes that you need to reach, right? So how do you integrate? Right now, only 11% of these enterprises are integrating the solutions across their intelligent automation ecosystem. Most of them, like 38%, are primarily focusing on just one technology, and only a third of them are actually using multiple technologies in piecemeal areas. And a reason for this is too many enterprises are pushing these projects down the stack, down to the lower middle management project layers, where it's harder to get synergies across areas in the companies. It's harder to break down barriers between departments and things like that. So if our senior leaders within the business aren't fully embracing and engaging and trying to understand how to leverage integrated technologies and integrated automation, they will fail. And no one has that God-given right now not to keep learning and not to keep educating themselves and training themselves on this stuff. And I think we're reaching that juncture in the industry now where, you are not worth your salt as an operation leader if you don't know how to align your operations with your automation strategy. And scale is really the big gamut here. This is where we're really looking to to see much more drive here. And it's not so much just scaling your technology, because as you can see down here, lack of options at the bottom is not the issue here. It's not the technology, it's the inability to understand the financial investment needed, the clarity and accountability needed, who is driving the agenda, does it sit with the CIO, does it sit with the COO or the CFO, how do you manage your change management concerns better, how do you manage your changes in governance and risk. All these things need to be taken into account in terms of achieving these goals. And that really takes us to, I think, the environment we're at. And I'm going to ask Elena, my colleague, to take us through how we're viewing this emerging ecosystem and where integrated automation is really sitting.
Thank you, Phil. Hi, everyone. Elena Christopher. So one of the interesting things that we see happening is some of that data that Phil just walked us through is that we see enterprises are undoubtedly really trying a lot of the different innovations out there, the technology levers that are available to them to help them drive ultimately transformations within their organization. But what the data also shows is that it's, again, piecemeal, siloed and such. But what we see happening in the marketplace is essentially what's depicted on the slide here, is that we see the provider community, the vendor community, coming from a variety of different angles, saying we hear and are observing pain and challenge coming from the enterprise community. There's a real want to integrate at a technology level to be able to get past that task automation that Phil was just describing, to be able to better enable end-to-end workflows, to enable scale, to grapple with underlying challenges like data and such. If we do a quick around the horn here, starting at the top of the screen, we see a lot of this coming from the systems integrators. In many ways, I think the global SIs out there are some of the firms that are doing and have been doing a lot of this heavy lifting, really curating a lot of different content and tools, trying to help their customers ultimately bring these tools and technologies together to create different levers to help them drive transformation. But what's interesting about this sphere is that, with the exception of just a small handful of them, it's always baked into a transformative services engagement. If you look to the robotic transformation software products, this, by the way, is the RPA category, but as per what Phil just talked us through, RPA, we see not a heck of a lot of transformation going on, and sort of a bit of a bait and switch over what it's actually capable of doing. So we've actually thought to rename RPA to RTS, which stands for Robotic Transformation Software, just to really put that emphasis on the transformation piece of it. But many of the firms who are true RPA or are involved in the RPA ecosystem and maybe trading a bit on the RPA brand, which that undeniably has gotten and continues to get loads of recognition in the marketplace. Every single one of these providers is really starting to realize that their capabilities innate in their own platforms, tools and such, are enhanced by working with other complementary tool sets to get to some of that end-to-end automation that I just referred to. So if you look on, go to Blue Prism, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, sort of the big three of the true RPA vendors, you'll see artificial intelligence everywhere there, just to underscore that point there that it needs to get beyond RPA to really push the functionality. We see this too coming from some of the enterprise software products. Look at what so many big corporations around the world have in their back offices and running a lot of their core back office functions are ERP systems, various systems of record. You've seen moves like SAP, they've got their Leonardo intelligent automation capabilities, but they did things like last year acquired a small French RPA firm to start embedding this type of intelligent automation. So there's a push. I think we're definitely going to continue to hear more from this. And then lastly, you've got a lot of the AI and some of the analytics providers that are also realizing that their functionality is better and the outcomes are better for their clients when it's integrated. And so this all leads to the pushes towards the center, what we're talking about today, this concept of the integrated automation platform and the ability to make that integration seamless. So rather than bootstrapping like so many of the SIs have been doing, and like so many just overwrought data scientists and operations leaders, all of those tasked within enterprises to try and curate and figure out how all this tech works together, it starts to make both an opportunity as well as almost a requirement from many of the technology vendors out there to make it easier for this all to work together. And so thus we come to this point, which is why we say we're talking a lot about technology today, and the tech is important. We all know that it's the enabler, but truly scaling automation, really driving transformation, it's so much more than just the technology. It really involves the people and the processes as well. Back as early as probably 2017 at HFS, we came up with this concept that you see pictured on the left of the screen. We call it our AAA trifecta, but it's automation, it's AI, it's analytics. Each of these is powerful in its own right, but they're much more powerful when you integrate them to, just as I had already described, to go from automating different tasks or helping to refine a certain process. You can now go much broader. From just automating some emails to having full work streams, either with humans in the loop or without. But the other piece of this, and sort of our double meaning of integrated automation, you can integrate the tools. That's wonderful, as we've been talking about. But to this broader people and process technology, I hearken back to what we'll call the original trifecta, sometimes called the golden triangle, the people, process, and technology, just as a reminder to, I mean, everyone on this call, and certainly to everyone in the marketplace that's pursuing what's really viewed as the great potential of automation, is that in order to make it truly transformative, it needs to be that magic combo of your technology, those enabling levers, but really applied and used effectively across your people and across your processes. And that's really what's going to get us to scale. And so if we pop onto the next slide, we'll show a little roadmap of what we think this looks like. Because as Phil had alluded to, as we go through, as this integration trajectory goes forward, we get from the piecemeal automation, which is essentially where we are today, which is delivering some business benefit, but is very linear, as Phil had talked us through. As we start to get more integration, what goes up is the degree of process transformation as well as the business benefit. And then with the end state being what we're terming integrated automation in both senses of the concept, at the technology level, but as well in the people and process. But Phil, I'd love to turn it back to you, and let's bring some of the other folks on our webinar into the conversation here.
Yeah, thank you, Elena. And hopefully we've set the context. And what I'd like to do now is introduce Rajan at Indicom, and maybe before we answer the first question, could you maybe introduce yourself a bit and tell us a little bit about the role that you've been driving at Indicom?
Sure, Phil. Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. My name is Rajan Nair. I'm the CEO of Indicom's financial services business. And Indicom is one of the leading, if not the leading, provider of mortgage outsourcing and mortgage technology services to the U.S. mortgage industry. And we've been in business for close to 17 years and have gone through all the ups and downs that the mortgage industry has thrown at us. And happy to be here, Phil.
Excellent. Thanks, Rajan. And I think while we're doing the rest of the introductions, I should probably get Ashish and Govind as well, just to pipe in to say hi and introduce themselves.
Thanks, Phil. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining. This is Ashish Mehra, co-founder, CEO of AntWorks, and as we've always been saying, we've come at automation from a business process perspective and not an technology perspective, and I'll talk a little bit more about it as we progress through this webinar. Govind, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Ashish. Hi, this is Govind Sandhu. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of AntWorks. And yeah, I'll just reiterate what Ashish just said, that we really looked at it, Phil, from a slightly different lens. And, both of us having been practitioners and having run large back office operations, really looked at it from a different vantage point, which we'll touch upon as we go through this this journey today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chaps. So I'd like to then hand this over to Rajan, and I'd love you to tell us about Indicom, the challenge that exists within your industry, and what makes automation into mortgage origination and servicing so hard, Rajan.
Well, happy to do so, Phil. So just to set some context about who Indicom is and what we do, we are, as I mentioned in my introduction, the leading provider of technology-enabled outsourcing solutions. So that's really where we started, by providing wide-scale enterprise outsourcing services to the U.S. mortgage industry. We work with, as a company, we work across with 300 clients. We have about 4,000 employees spread across 31 offices in 9 countries. Our focus on the mortgage industry has always been on the process side. When the loan comes in, the loan application comes in, all the way through its completion. We've handled pretty much every single function and every single step that's involved there. We have both U.S. onshore and offshore based operations, and that was what we've been doing for a majority of the last 17 years. But along the way, we've actually also identified technology opportunities and identified opportunities where we can bring in some of the automation capabilities that allow us to streamline the processes that we've been handling, so that over and above just providing the labor arbitrage component, the technology piece allows us to bring in some exponential efficiencies and productivity improvements through the life cycle. So just kind of, from an overall industry perspective, the kind of services that we provide range from end-to-end mortgage processing. We do what's called mortgage quality control and audits. This slide provides just a context of the size and scale of our operations: 100,000 underwrites a year of loan underwrites, 60,000 loan audits. And I'll touch upon some of these as we go through some of the problem statement that we want to articulate for the mortgage industry. Just to set some context for the U.S. mortgage industry itself, it is the second largest component of the GDP in the United States. It's a $1.5 trillion industry. It is an industry that is technically part of the financial services segment, but it is really underserved from a technology perspective. That is one of the things that we found startling and surprising, because this industry relies largely on the ups and downs and the vagaries of the interest rates market, and that really is what drives the business in the mortgage industry. So till about 2009 or 2008, before the economic meltdown, the mortgage industry was happy pretty much riding the waves up and down, and the scaling up and the scaling down of the operations was pretty much a norm in this industry. So the technology deployment was minuscule. It was really more focused on workflow applications. It was more focused on back office applications. There was hardly any automation, hardly any integration that we can speak of. What changed was in 2008, after the meltdown, the mortgage industry was the one that really suffered the brunt of it. And it's well documented in movies and in books and in thousands of articles that have been out there. The industry really went through a transformation. And in 2011 and 12, that's really when this industry became a highly regulated industry, with the establishment of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which was from a regulatory oversight, really started putting in a lot of emphasis on the regulations and compliance in the industry. What happened since then is that basically the cost of originating a loan has nearly tripled, from just in terms of how the cost has shot up. That has really been a big factor in how the industry has started looking at technology. And we've been through that journey. So as we've gone through that journey, we've actually handled more and more of the back office functions for these lenders. And what we found is that there's been a tendency to just deploy people at the problem. It was fine when the margins were high, but as the interest rates started going up and the volume started dropping, the margin squeeze started getting amplified, and the cost of originating the loan kept on going up. And so what happened there was that the industry started moving towards, you know, the most low-hanging fruit, like OCR, like RPA. You know, that was kind of the easy thing to go after. So it was like, oh, if we can automate, we can take 10 people worth of jobs and just deploy, you know, a series of bots, and we can try and automate it. That was something that was tried for a few years. And again, it really comes back to one of the messages that Elena, you mentioned in one of your slides, is that, you know, basically technology really overpowered the discussion essentially, because it was almost an overcorrection for some period of time. Gradually, what has happened is that there is a realization that the focus and emphasis now needs to shift to people, to kind of the people aspect of it, and the technology being an enabler that ties the people and process component together. The biggest challenge in kind of getting to that level of efficiencies that intelligent automation can bring into the mortgage industry is some very specific nuances associated with the mortgage business. The mortgage business, essentially, when you think about it, it is the biggest decision that a consumer makes. It's a loan, it's the largest debt that the person undertakes. So when you think about it, the mortgage life cycle is unlike any other credit transaction that's out there. It takes 60 to 90 days from the time the consumer expresses an interest to originate a loan till the time they actually secure the loan. Once they secure the loan, they establish the relationship with whoever is servicing the loan for the next 15 to 30 years. It's unlike pretty much any financial product that's out there. So as a result, there is a huge aggregation of data and documents associated with the consumer and everything to do with the consumer, their income, their credit, their assets, the collateral, which is the property. So as the loan moves through its life cycle, there are documents that are added to the repository for every loan. And at the end of the loan transaction, we're looking at a loan file that has close to, you know, 100 documents spanning 700 to 8,000 pages. Because from a perspective of automation, we always have to look at where do you go to the source, where do you get to the data. The data is within these documents and across different systems. To be able to pull all those data together, pull the documents together in a homogeneous manner, to be able to then drive some of the automation downstream is the #1 challenge that the industry faces. So what happens is that there is multiple touches on the loan. There is an emphasis on improving the quality of the loan. As a result, there is redundant functions being handled and tasks being performed through the life cycle. So what has happened is that because technology there was just an absolute lack of adoption of any technology till about 2011 or 12, and then there was an overcorrection with some, you know, with just some random deployment of, you know, what seemed to be attractive automation options. There is now a realization that what needs to be done is what is needed is technology that addresses the source of the problem, which is to get the data and the docs correctly as they come in from the borrower. So it's essentially the old adage of garbage in, garbage out, to kind of address that issue. So that is where we have seen and we have attacked the problem. We have, we have tremendous experience in the business process. The knowledge of the functions has allowed us to basically, build some of those automation solutions. And that's really where we partnered with AntWorks, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a minute. But that's really where, just to kind of sum up how we've addressed the problem and kind of identified the issue. And the industry is still dealing with it. It's very early on in the life cycle of, deployment of intelligent automation options. But that's really why we are very excited, because again, the scope and size of this problem is tremendous, it's huge. And it's not going away anytime soon. The mortgage industry is here to stay. People will originate mortgages, they will refinance loans, they will take home equity loans, and therefore it's a huge opportunity and something that we're very excited about.
Excellent, yes, and you're appealing to somebody who's personally going through this process. I can very much align with a lot of this. So thank you very much, Rajan. Let's move on to our lovely friends at AntWorks, who are going to tell us a bit about their path of developing this integrated automation platform. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Phil. This is Ashish. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, AntWorks is an artificial intelligence and intelligent automation organization that, addressed the automation challenge, as Govind said, using a different lens. Both Govind and myself come with decades of business process experience, and when we decided to come to the marketplace, RPA was in its prime, and we saw the challenge that everybody was looking at data transport, and everyone was looking at moving data, and everybody, as Phil mentioned, was looking at task automation as against looking at the end-to-end business process and saying, how can I automate a business process straight through and focus on straight through processing rather than automating bits and pieces of the business process that will give me some uplift in reducing cost, not necessarily give dollar back to the business that can be redeployed. So we came at it completely from a business process perspective and not a technology perspective. We came at it from the perspective of automation should be deployed at the business level on the operations floor by the business analyst or operations manager, and should not really need the intervention or specialized skill sets of particular coding languages. So what we did was, when we looked at this, we said, what's the starting point? And we said the starting point was clean data or curated data, if you may. And that's where we saw the whole ecosystem of automation was broken, because everybody was using OCR, which is 50 years old, not been reinvented, continues to bounce off a font library and then give you the data that you need, and can only deal with structured, and over the last year and a half has moved into dealing with semi-structured data. But if you look at the back office, you have 4 broad data types, which is structured, unstructured, inferred, and image data. So we set out and built our own data ingestion engine or machine vision engine that we call cognitive machine reading. And what that really, if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, that's what the cognitive machine reading engine delivers to you. At the end of the process of your data, it delivers enriched data, which is really the starting point of your automation journey. So it pre-processes your document and gives you an uplift from an extraction perspective. And it then makes sure, as it goes through the journey, it makes sure that the data that it's giving you is accurate. And then you move on to the whole digital workforce management side, where you're looking at things like bot productivity. We've always measured our employees on how many transactions they have delivered in an 8-hour shift or a 9-hour shift. And all of a sudden, there's a huge amount of hypocrisy when bots are deployed that productivity is not being measured. And my question is why? So we addressed that. We addressed multi-tenancy. It just absolutely frustrated us as individuals who have spent decades in the back office, why you need to have a post-it sticker on a desktop saying, do not touch it, bot in motion or bot in action. Why shouldn't you be able to deploy 10 bots on one desktop? Why should you have a desktop? Why shouldn't it run at the server and the enterprise level and you have a control center? So we addressed all these challenges because we came at it from a business process perspective and ensured that we then pulled machine learning and intelligence and embedded it right through the platform and bundled it all together to provide a bouquet of technologies to the business user that can come into play at any given point of time for the right use. And I'll use my famous butter chicken or chicken tikka masala example, where The whole world is, talked about RPA in so much grandeur. But if you just take that dish and I take you inside my kitchen, RPA is one spice, while you need 17 spices for the dish to taste tasty. With that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Govind Sandhu, who will walk you through more details around data and how we've addressed that, and really what we're calling the integrated automation platform, or automation 2.0. Govind, over to you.
Thanks, Ash. No, I think, Phil, you called it right out. I think some of the data that you guys presented is very revealing. And what's interesting is that, there's this point about how many people are really using automation as a strategy for customer outcomes, right? And for Ash and me, when we were thinking about this, the only starting point was customer outcome and how can you impact customer outcome. And the minute you start thinking about tactical operational benefits, you will see something like RPA serving their purpose. But the minute you change the goalpost to a customer outcome focus, you suddenly realize that it's very limiting to do tactical operational stuff in the back office, because you're not being able to touch the customer outcome at all, or being able to touch it but in a very limited fashion. And so I'll take a very simple analogy, pulling together what Ashish and Rajan have said, which is essentially, think about, and there's this one image on the screen, think about, these logs of wood really being goods and services that your organization is providing to its customers. And think about the water underneath, right? And the goods and services are going to move only as fast as that stream of water which is moving. And the reality is that in today's world, all our goods and services are basically riding a data stream, right? And your automation focus is, how do you make that data stream efficient so that you can generate efficiency in the goods and services that you're delivering for the process outcomes and customer outcomes that you're doing. And so if you think about it like that, your organization's ability to deliver services and goods at the speed at which you want to do it is really driven by the data velocity within your organization. And that's really what our focus was when we were building the platform. And we said, and then we said, how do you define data velocity? And we said data velocity is basically the accuracy and speed with which data is moving through your organization, because that's what's going to determine how well and quickly can you deliver a service. And then there is this enrichment process that happens as the data moves through your organization. And those are the things that you need to take control of. And that's why we say that, essentially you need to take control of the journey of data through your organization, right? And when you talk about the journey of data, what Ash was talking about, it starts right at the outset from the time you get a paper into your organization till the time that paper is turned into curated data for decisioning and delivery of service. And in order to achieve that, you need to have multiple technologies working together to give you that outcome. And to give you a flavor of that, RPA would be one small piece in that journey, and controlling the journey of your data for transporting it from one system to the other. So the way we look at it is, how do you take control of the journey of data in your organization? How do you turn raw data coming into your organization into information which is curated, which can then drive decisioning and transactions within your organization? And so that's very simple. And if you go back to the slide which Ash was showing, which really talks about the functionality, this looks pretty simple to do. But if you skip 2 slides forward, I'll show you a slide which actually tells you what does it really mean to do that. And so everything that is functionality actually requires, this is just a subset of these different technologies to be sitting under the platform and to come to life to be able to deliver those outcomes for you. And then the important point is, again, as touched on it, I think Elena also spoke about it. How do you take complex technology and make it easy for businesses to consume? And that's really the focus. Because in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been so much incredible, interesting, yet complex technology which has been made available to businesses. But the piece which has been missing is making it easy for businesses to consume. And that's really the focus of the platform. So all that functionality that you need and all the different technologies that you need, whether it is image recognition, object recognition, natural language modeling, pattern recognition, machine learning, data reinforcement algorithms, classification algorithms, predictive analytics, data certainty using heuristics, all these complex things are actually sitting at the back with a very simple consumption layer on top. And that's really been what our focus is, to help customers take control of their data journeys in a way that they can consume complex technology pretty simply for their businesses.
Excellent. Thanks, Govind. So, let's sort of shift gears a little bit into the relationship you've got with Indicom, and Rajan, if you want to talk a bit about why you decided to work with AntWorks and where you're going, what you built.
Absolutely. So, as I had said in my introduction, through the 17 or 18-year journey that we've had with the U.S. mortgage industry and setting up different back office functions and services for large and mid-sized lenders, we learned along the way that there was just tremendous opportunity to bring in leverage automation. So we did the normal thing that everyone would do. We tapped into RPA technologies out there. We built our own OCR framework. So we mapped documents. As I mentioned, it's very document intensive and data hungry. So we built all of that ourselves. What we started realizing again is that we were falling into the same trap that everyone else was. Then that was the emphasis was too much on the technology and not on integrating the process and the people that are associated with it. So that's really around the time when we started looking for options and other platforms that we could bring into our fold. We had our own quality management and loan tracking system called Audit Genius, where we really needed to, we were using, again, I said, a lot of the homegrown automation capabilities. We took a lot of the OCR engines off the shelf, try to package that into Audit Genius. Just finding out that everything would require we had to have a very large engineering team to be able to constantly keep churning out new use cases, map new documents, and that's really when when we ran into Govind and his team and Ash and his team, where we really started seeing a technology framework or a technology platform that allowed us to be able to bring in what I really liked was the low code, no code kind of scenario, where the framework was ready, the tools were available, but most importantly, what it could do is allow me to be able to bring in a lot of our subject matter experts, our process folks, to be able to actually set up some of the automation use cases, set up the documents, teach the system how to interpret the documents, how to recognize them, how to extract the right data. A lot of that prior to that was done by our technology team, and our the time to market for our solutions was really getting impacted as a result of that. And that's really what was the most attractive feature, if you may, of the platform. Then as we started to get to know the AntWorks team, what we really liked is the fact that they had a true partnership mentality and a partnership approach to their relationships. Because there is, I can tell with 100% confidence that there isn't one technology platform out there that's going to work for everyone. There is just still way too early in its life cycle for that to happen. So that's where you need a responsive partner who is going to work with you very closely, who is going to provide insight into the roadmap of the products, and align that with your business requirements, which is really what we were looking to do. We were looking to deploy some of these automation solutions within our internal operations, because we had close to 1,400 people working across the mortgage lifecycle. That was the area where we could deploy, and then from there we could take it to the market. So that's really what kind of got us, working with the AntWorks team, and that's been an extremely successful partnership and continues to grow. We are throwing in more and more use cases into the mix, and again, the emphasis is to be able to get clean documents and data right at the source, right at the time that the borrower provides that information. If we can actually address it right there, then all the way through the straight-through processing approach, where we can, in the end, be able to deliver kind of a lower cost mortgage setup, but also, in the end, produce high quality loan packages and loan mortgages that allow the lender to be able to scale up their business and scale up their operation. So that's kind of the, that's the integrated approach that we've put together, and it took us a while. I mean, we had to go through a few iterations, as I said, trial and error. We did, we made a lot of the same mistakes that we see lenders out there, do. I mean, basically there's a lot of shiny new objects out there. We kept pursuing that, and then after having burnt our fingers a few times, we were, at least we had, I think one of the things that we had the humility to recognize that those don't work. So what we now put together is, the concept of an automation platform, what I call an automation factory, which is where on one side, it feeds in documents, data that comes in from the loan origination systems, and the business rules that need to be built. What we're doing is we're basically combining, now we are able to combine our folks who have process expertise, the business knowledge, and the technology teams in a collaborative manner to be able to, in the end, be able to deliver these automation solutions and quickly. I mean, our turn times are much faster. We are able to make changes, adapt, and the level of accuracy that we're seeing is pretty much close to where we need it to be. So that's kind of how that was the genesis. I don't know if Ash or Govind, you want to add something to that, but that's how I look at the journey with AntWorks.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think thanks for that. Thanks for that, Rajan. No, I think that's well described. I think the key of it, again, going back to what we've been talking about all day, is about having a single platform available, which can take control of the full journey, right? So yeah, thanks, Rajan, for that.
Yeah, I got a good question that's come in from the audience. We've got several questions, obviously. One is very specific to how much content that is specific to the mortgage industry in terms of extraction and cognitive capabilities are built within AntWorks. And when you extract data from like mortgage documents, for example, it's very important to relate this to industry lingo, etc. So, I mean, maybe Govind or Ash, you want to talk a bit about how you can really align some of your capabilities with industries like mortgage.
Sure, I can take that, Phil. So Phil, thank you for the question. As an approach, as a platform, we've kind of relied a lot on Indicom and their deep domain knowledge for the domain expertise. Having said that, the other challenge is that most clients that we work with are very sensitive about their data, and so we normally do not build general purpose knowledge centers within the platform, which can be leveraged across clients. But having said that, one of the core competencies of the platform is that it has very accelerated learning, and what that means is that's where getting one layer deeper, we've kind of moved away from neural networks as an approach to machine learning and taken fractal networks as an approach, which allows for very, very high yield with much smaller data sets for learning. So industry adapting the platform for an industry is quite a quick and painless process. So we're still able to use it across clients, but not leverage their expertise across each other.
Okay. Thank you, Govind. I think that tackles that one pretty well. I think in a related area, we've had a very good question from a gentleman who is asking about, do like the Fortune 100 have a bit of an unfair advantage in terms of speed, scope, and spend, in terms of moving ahead here, in terms that they can invest in talent and tech, or is this something which many mid-sized businesses can really take advantage of here? I mean, Elena, what's been your experience so far with this?
Sure. Firstly, I'll say great question. Probably I'll respond to it in a couple of ways. The first and perhaps most important response is that there will be, I think, maybe not have and have nots. I think it's going to be a big question of when. But the key point that I want to start with is that this is inevitable. The trajectory and the path that we're going down, this becomes part of the fabric of how business operates. So we believe that very decisively. And so because of that, it can't be haves and have-nots. It's like not having a phone within your local brick and mortar storefront. You have really simple ways of communicating, engaging with your customers, and doing your business. But what I am starting to see more so in the marketplace is that we definitely do see that there are benefits to speed. And the data from the same study that we were showing earlier, I've got a cut of that came out, and it's actually included in a report that we issued in late March called Integrated Automation, Why You've Been Doing It All Wrong, where we show that those enterprises that didn't cut it by size, but by financial performance, those that are doing better in terms of top line and bottom line metrics are those that are scaling integrated automation faster. So there's a bit of those who are more nimble and have speed with them, they start to be really the leaders in this space. But what I see from a market response standpoint is that I think there's a lot of focus on trying to figure out how to bring this to market. I hear loads and loads of different vendors talk to me about RPA as a service and things such as that I don't think are fully cracked as of yet. But I definitely see a lot of these SaaS-based, or what I think is perhaps more relevant here, business process as a service, sort of technology surrounded by services, starting to be the potential answer to make intelligent automation and eventually integrated automation available and driven down into more of the mid-market segment. So again, just back to the keyword, inevitable. It will come, and it's honestly the responsibility of the marketplace to figure out how to get this there, because those enterprises with less budget, perhaps some of the ability to not move as fast and change their culture, they also need access to this as well. So it's not an if, it's a when.
Okay, thank you, Elena. I've got a number of questions around what companies should do or can they do who've already made quite a lot of investments in some of these earlier phase RPA technologies. Maybe Ash, you'd like to have a crack at some of this, but what do you think is going to happen to a lot of these companies who have made a lot of these earlier investments and feel that they're struggling to make new business cases for further investment to get ROI on this? I mean, how are you advising clients? What is your experience in terms of maybe some who've made some false starts and are struggling to get things past maybe we've got 5 or 10 bots operational to something much more scalable?
Thanks, Phil. So, there are two ways to look at this, and you can look at it through two lenses. One is to sweat that investment out. And if you look at the way the AntWorks Einstein platform is built, it's built no different than a box of Lego. So you've got data ingestion, which is cognitive machine reading at the front end. You've got data transport, or what we call our queen bot, in the center, and then you've got machine learning sitting in the back end. So if organizations have made investments in one of the RPA tools that exist in the marketplace, and they want to go down the path of sweating that investment out, I'd say where AntWorks will help you sweat that investment out and in fact reap benefits from that investment is feed your existing investment in your bot with cleaner and more enriched and curated data. So plug into the Einstein cognitive machine reading engine where we'll help you with cleaner and curated data, which will only make your downstream task automation smoother. The second part is, and we've all gone through this in our life in some way or form, whether it be an investment in a jacket that didn't fit you, a shoe that didn't fit you, or a piece of technology that didn't work. You know what? Cut your losses, because the longer you stay with that investment, the longer your business case is never going to stack up. So cut your losses there. We worked with customers to make sure that we found ways and means of making that back to them, because the upside that the Einstein platform can give you will, help you, if not wipe out, but reduce the impact of that investment already made. So, going to have to take some tough decisions there. But you could take two paths, a softer path or a hard path, which then will hold you in good stead downstream.
Right. I think that's some good advice there. So I think it's been a fantastic conversation today, and I want to finish up with a great question that everyone can, really have a stab at here. And maybe we can start with you, Rajan, in terms of, based on a lot of what we've talked about today and in the weeks building up to putting up this webcast and some of the thought leadership, is what is the one best practice you would want to recommend to achieve integrated automation? So if you could deliver one piece of advice to the audience today, Rajan, what would it be?
Well, I have many, so to pick one is always a challenge, but the one that I would go with our experience is, and I think I touched upon it, is not to let the technology and the platform drive the automation decisions. You have to put it in the context of the process and the people structure that you have in place. Do not ignore the people side of things, because they do play a big part in how the automation is eventually going to work and be deployed. There is a certain level of human involvement that is absolutely critical for the process to be able to work smoothly. And most importantly, you have to tie it into, in the case of the mortgage business, for us, as I've mentioned, the documents and the data pretty much drive everything. So there, the process component, which is really driven by the obtaining of the data and the docs, is what drove the automation. So that would be my primary advice, is that find the right mix of technology platform. There won't be one, but you will have to find the right mix that you can put out, that you can bring into the fold, but really tie it into the people and the process that drive your organization for really enduring success with the automation initiatives.
Thank you very much, Rajan. Maybe Govind, what would you, if you had to give one best practice from everything you've learned in recent, what would that be?
I would just say, Phil, I think, when you suddenly talk about automation with a different lens away from RPA, etc., I would just say one thing, which is don't be tactical about your automation.
Don't be tactical. Fair enough. Keep it simple. Ash, what would your one best practice be?
Phil, biased or unbiased answer?
Why don't we'll start with the biased one then, and then we'll get to the unbiased. How's that?
Okay, I think the biased one everybody knows, so I won't say it. But if I had to give one best practice, it would be look at your automation journey holistically. Don't look at tasks. Look at your business process as a whole process, and look at how you can automate that straight through, and that should be the end objective. Straight through processing is what every business owner every business leader should aim to achieve. If not, all it does is it brings in multiple layers of technology, it brings in multiple layers of skill sets, which when you start looking at downstream and you look at it holistically, it starts complicating your business process and not simplifying it. So don't just look at it from a cost perspective, but look at it from a holistic perspective.
Great, thank you, Ash. And then finally, I guess last but not least, Elena from HFS. You know, you've had this conversation with many clients, including this week where we met. What do you say is the best practice that you'd like to do this with?
Well, firstly, I'll state that I agree with the SAGE recommendations from Rajan, from Ash, and from Govin. And so what I think the best thing I can add to supplement them and to support them is that as enterprises, regardless of size, harkening back to that question a few minutes back, you have to plan for success and change. If you're treating these as a project or an initiative or an experiment, let's be honest, that's doomed to fail. That's not a scale mindset. So if you're serious about wanting to go back to that first slide that you shared, the data slide that you shared, what are the objectives? Drive revenue, make our customers happier. If that's what your objectives are, you need to build around those success criteria and go big. It is a big go big or go home, because if you treat it as a project, you get project results.
Okay, thank you, Elena. And I think I'll add one in, seeing as I'm here. But, you know, we've got to stop thinking about individual technologies, because I don't even think we're going to be talking about AI in a couple of years. We're going to be talking about business models and data and achieving business outcomes, and how do we do this? And so I do think a lot of this has to be, let's stop obsessing about some of these individual little components and start thinking about what do we need to achieve, and how do we align our team to achieving that, and how do we get them the training and the skill sets and the creative mindsets to do that. So I do think we're going through a transitional period in the industry where we need to think about our talent and our people and look at the journey we're on, and stop obsessing with short-term fixes and let's make this screen scrape and attach to this document here, to, okay, that's all hygiene. How do we think bigger picture about end-to-end processes, and how do we truly make this all work? So I think stop thinking about individual bits and pieces and start thinking about, you know, what are our real business objectives here? Because I think the conversation is going to shift quite quickly. You know, it's already shifted from RPA, it's shifted from intelligent automation, to be honest, to AI and beyond. You know, what are we really trying to achieve here? So you know, I hope that's come across quite well today. You know, so I'd like to thank everybody for their time. We're going to have a copy of this presentation available, a recording and slides, if you go to hfsresearch.com. Also go to antworks.com. Is it antworks.com?
So if I could just correct you there, it's ant.works.
Ant.work, that's it. I knew it was something different there. Ant.works, thank you, Ash. So Ant.works is going to also host a copy of the paper that we've written, where you can download as well. So if you go there, I'm hoping it's available today. If not, come back over the weekend and we'll have it up for you guys to download. So Rajan Anir at Indicom, Ashish Mehra and Govin Sandhu at AntWorks, and Elena Christopher at HFS. Thank you very much for an excellent discussion today. I hope this is all worth your while, who dialed in on a Friday, and this has given us some good context and takeaway. This is an ongoing industry conversation, so thank you all for being part of this. We'd like to have everyone back here again very shortly to continue this discussion as we really figure out the next steps of this industry. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone.